So today, my guest that I'll be able to allow her to share her story and what they're doing in the childhood cancer community is Elena Bliss of Brittany's Believer. So, Elena, I want to turn the floor over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, Curtis. Thanks for having me. Thanks for providing such a platform for childhood cancer awareness, advocacy, and for families to share the stories that a lot of what people don't see goes on behind the scenes, or what they experience when their child's diagnosed with cancer, and what that looks like. So thank you.
Absolutely. It absolutely is my pleasure to be able to speak to as many people as possible, and my honor to meet amazing families that are going through this, because I'm sure there's so many out there that are just like us, that when that diagnosis came down, we felt like we were alone on an island and had nobody to turn to. So this has become a platform and the ability to be able to see that there is so much support out there. And I love creating a platform that allows other people to find that support that they may be missing. So I want to hear all about Brittany to start off with.
So Brittany is our daughter. She was born in May of 2018 to my husband and I. We have one older child, so they had about a 12-year age gap. So it was really fun for us. We wanted nothing more than to add to our family, and she came in and she just completed our family. She had this like energy and spirit about her. She was just so energetic and lovey. She had this thing that she started when she was little. She would always be like rubbing our eyebrows anytime that she needed comfort or anything. And so we had what we, envisioned was our perfect family. And then in May of 2022, Brittany was dealing with some seasonal allergies. Nothing new. She'd always kind of had this for the last couple of years. Took her to the doctors, and they discovered that she had a double ear infection. Okay, no big deal. Put her on antibiotics. So we went through about a week of antibiotics, didn't see much improvement, went back. They said, oh yeah, like one of them's just kind of hanging on there, which was the right ear. So they're like, we'll just, do more antibiotics. And so we said, okay. Then we started noticing some blood coming from the ear, some like discharge or drainage. Called the pediatrician again. They were like, bring her in. They saw her that Friday, right before Mother's Day. And they said, oh, it's just a really bad ear infection that's just not responding to antibiotics. It's a ruptured eardrum. It's the pus coming out. We'll just put her on stronger antibiotics. Okay. That evening, my husband and I started noticing that she had some facial asymmetry, almost similar to if somebody had a stroke. So we called the pediatricians. They said it could be Bell's palsy. Take her to the ER. So we brought her to the ER. And they did a CT scan, and, they're like, yeah, there's like something there. We just think it's not responding to the antibiotics. Checked us into the hospital. Then they said, nope, somebody took a look at the images again. We need to send her for an MRI. So I work in MRI. So once I started kind of getting that feeling of this is what we're looking at, I was a little worried. Bring her down to the MRI, and they're like, yep, she has like a mass in her inner ear. They thought it was what's called Langerhans cell histocytosis. So they're like, we're going to ship you off to Boston. We also need to start her on blood thinners because she had developed 2 blood clots in the venous portions of her brain. So they send us to Boston. We get to Boston around 3 a.m. All the teams start coming in. Neuro comes in and they do their assessment, and infectious disease comes in and do their assessment. And so we met with an oncologist, and they said, yep, it's textbook Langerhans cell histocytosis. Textbook. Looks exactly like it. That's where it's located. This is an easy thing to treat. It is a type of cancer, but it's like a -1 on the chemo scale. So my husband and I are like, okay, this is not what we expected, but manageable, it seems. Then it starts coming in. Everybody's reports start coming back. Then they're like, no, we think it's like this really bad infectious disease. Long story short, at the end of the day, they're like, we're just going to take her to the OR. We think it's just a really bad ear infection. We're going to put tubes in her ears and drain it, and you guys are going to go home. And so my husband and I are like, okay, great. Like, we're in Boston. Like, this is what they're telling us. So we wheel her down to the OR, and as we are signing the consent forms to have her sedated for the surgery, they said, changed our mind. We're going to go in and do a biopsy. And at that point, my husband and I were like, okay, now we have to grapple with this. And so did the biopsy, waited a few days, and it came back embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma with a parameningeal placement. So it's most rhabdomyosarcomas are either embryonal or alveolar, and they're located within the body. Embryonal is usually behind the eyes or within the head neck region. The inner ear portion is only accounted for about 3% of kids that are diagnosed with that. So she had a very rare location. The petrous apex, it had started destroying the portion of the temporal bone, and it was right outside the meninges of the brain, so it was parameningeal. So it was inoperable, which sucks because surgery is like a huge portion of getting to the meat of removing the meat of these tumors. So we had to deal with listening to the fact that our daughter had this different type of cancer that we weren't prepared for, and then start going through, what does this look like? How do we treat this? She can't have surgery. She has to have chemo. She's just a few days out of her fourth birthday. So she has no idea what's going on. How do you explain to a child that they have cancer when they're 4 and that they have to undergo all these procedures? So she had to have a PET CT to do further staging. Thankfully, she only had the one tumor and it hadn't spread. But as we're grappling with, like, okay, now we're dealing with blood thinners for a few months that we have to inject to her daily at home, learning how to do that, dealing with, okay, chemo, figuring out work. I have a second child at home. We also get told that the chemo treatments that need to start as soon as possible have various side effects. And one of the biggest ones being that she would become infertile. And so we had to make the decision for our 4-year-old, do we move forward and just deal with that later on? Or do we have her undergo a second procedure to remove one of her ovaries in the hopes that one day it could be preserved and that she may be able to have kids? So, yeah, it's a lot when you are thrust into this world of just making these decisions that you don't have time to make, and you're relying on physicians to help guide you. But at the end of the day, you're their parent and you're trying to make the best decisions for them. So we ended up deciding to preserve one of her ovaries. So she had her port placed. She had one of her right ovaries removed. They had to go back in. When they did the biopsy, her ear just wouldn't stop bleeding. And we said multiple times, like, there's some, like, you guys, can you do something? Can you do something? I'm like, it'll clot, it'll clot. So when we went back in for the surgery, they sent us home for a few days. Thankfully, there was this fantastic ENT doctor who walked in, and she was just covered in blood. And he was like, this is unacceptable. And so he went in and he did this amazing procedure and fixed it and everything like that. But yeah, and then we were told she would do about a year of chemotherapy, about 30 rounds of proton radiation halfway through her chemotherapy. So we started chemo, typical side effects, nausea, vomiting, hair loss. Again, how do you explain to a 4-year-old what's happening to them, why you have to ask them to have their port accessed, why you have to ask them to take blood thinners twice a day. So it was a lot, and people just say it gets easier, the kids adapt, and I didn't believe it. And then about a month in, they adapt, and I don't know how, as I'm sure with other kids too, it's amazing the adaptability that they have when they're diagnosed with cancer versus the parents having to just endure everything. And the kids, it's just, Brittany she really handled it phenomenally. And then about halfway through, we had to move to Boston for 6 weeks. So we relocated, and she had to undergo proton radiation. They felt that would be the most effective treatment for the tumor, which involved her being sedated 5 days a week. She had to be fasted every morning. So she also wasn't the first one to be on the table. So you think about a 4-year-old getting up, can't have breakfast. Sometimes her appointments weren't until 9 or 10 o'clock. She had to be fasted, and then she had to be put to sleep every day. She hated that. She would always complain about buzzing behind her eyes when they would give her the sedation. So we would learn what she liked, techniques as far as just do it really fast, not slow. So we made it through 30 rounds of proton radiation, as well as undergoing chemo while we were out in Boston. And we came back, things were going smooth. She even went in for a routine brain MRI the end of October to just check for her blood clots. Those had resolved back in July, but they just wanted to keep track. And that MRI was clean. So this was the end of October. And then in the beginning of December, she went in for like her routine 3-month post-radiation MRI. And they unfortunately told us that her cancer has spread to the meninges around her brain. So it was become what they call leptomeningeal. And there is no cure. There is no treatment. We were told by the doctors at Boston via Zoom that she had maybe 4 to 6 months and to just go home and make memories. That's what they told us. Not, we could try this, not, there's this clinical trial, nothing. So my husband and I went and started posting on Facebook. I started cold emailing every rhabdomyosarcoma physician that I could find or access their email. We reached out across the country for somebody to give our daughter a chance, because she was perfectly fine, you know, as far as, yes, she still had cancer, but she was running around, she was happy, there was nothing. So you're telling me that my daughter's going to pass in 4 to 6 months and that Boston, one of the top hospitals, has nothing that they can even try? So that was infuriating. And one of the things that you learn as a cancer parent is you have to advocate so much for your child, and not everything that the doctors present to you is probably the best option, which is interesting in this world. So we actually found a doctor out of Connecticut Children's who took the time to meet with my husband and I over an hour out of his day and said, it is a long shot, but he's like, I'm willing to try. So he took us on and we tried. And at least at the end of the day, we knew that we did everything that we could for her, even though it doesn't comfort anything. But on June 6th, Brittany ended up passing. Just, you know, a few days after her 5th birthday. Yes, so she only made it about a year.
Well, I'll say the same thing to you that I've said to every parent that is unfortunately in this club of having an angel that's their child, is that there are no words that I can say that are going to make it better.
Yeah.
There's all the cliches that we hear along the way when the journey starts and afterwards, but there's nothing that's going to make it any better. But she sounds beautiful and amazing. And all I can say to comfort it even a little bit, and maybe it's in my own mind, is that I've got a sweet little girl up there too, and they're playing and they're whole again, yeah. Right? They're not suffering. And the one thing that I will say, and this may be cliche and maybe people don't agree with me, but you know what? The children don't lose their battle with cancer. They win, because they're no longer going through everything that they're going through, what they shouldn't face as a child. They're supposed to be running around and playing and just being kids. And they show us a strength and determination that isn't something that they learn necessarily because of this battle. It's because of their innocence. It's because of they don't know any better. And I wish to the heavens that the world had more of that injected into it every single day. That innocence that you have to not worry about everything else and do it with a smile on their face.
Yeah.
So from one parent to another, that it's affecting me now too. From one parent to another, I am sorry. But they're again, there's nothing I can say. There's nothing to comfort it. But what I will say is that the story that you tell lines up so well with the story that we faced and with the story that so many others have faced, from a diagnosis that takes forever to get, or it seems like forever, or it's misdiagnosed over and over again, or cast off by doctors as something super, super simple, as opposed to looking for the real answers. There's, again, and everybody wants to come at you during this journey. Did you try this? Did you try this? How about this? Have you tried this? And again, like you said, there is no time. We make decisions on the fly. Yeah. I tell the story that the very first surgery, when our daughter was admitted, on my oldest daughter's birthday, we had to rush to Milwaukee in the middle of the night, and she was given a CT scan. They said, she's got a mass. We have to admit her now. I signed the consent form to have a drain put into her head on the back of a tissue box. I didn't even have a clipboard. That was how it was in the middle of the night. I think at 4 a.m, I had to sign this form. And the reality of it is, when they give you all of this paperwork, and also the amazing feeling that you have when you're in a room with your child and 17 different doctors and nurses and specialists come in and you're overwhelmed. You have no idea what's going on or what to expect, and you face it with, we have to do everything. And you will always feel like we didn't do enough. But at the same time, you know you tried, we tried. But it's one of those things where we're not given a whole lot of options, and that's why, as parents in this community, you have to advocate not only when your child is fighting, but if you choose to advocate after they pass, or if they move on from this, you're doing it to make a better life, a better opportunity for kids in the future that are going to be diagnosed like this, because it takes too long, and there's too many options that are not given to us, and we got one option for treatment. It was, this is what we're doing. This is how it's going to go. It wasn't, you've got A or B, and at that point, what do? Do you say, like everybody I've heard in the past, well, if they've got a 2% chance of surviving, why do you even try? Why not just let them be a kid? Because there's 100% chance that we know exactly what's going to happen if we don't try. And so that 2% is like gold to us.
Yeah. I mean, we take anything. Like Brittany was given 70% chance, which you're like, 70%, they're still at 30%. But to your point, you're just presented with these things that you don't have a lot of time to research or digest, and if we're not in the medical field, we don't understand everything. And a lot of these doctors, when they are telling you stuff, they don't tell you everything. You have to ask certain questions or certain ways to get some of the answers that you're really looking for, because at the end of the day, they're going to present you with what they think is best, but you really have to dig. Like, we dug a lot when we were looking for somebody to take a chance on Brittany. Like, what could we try? And there was some chemos and things that I didn't go into that we tried before she passed. But the doctor that we were working with was kind of just like, yeah, we could, but it's like, but this is our child and you should be helping us, instead of me emailing 10 different doctors trying to get somebody to take her on. That's a huge thing too in the childhood cancer world, is access, or realizing that you can go to another doctor, you can reach out to somebody else. You're not limited to the team that you're stuck with, or I shouldn't say stuck with, but the team that is most local to you. And I know that money comes into it, and awareness, but a lot of these families, we're dealing with making decisions very quickly, rapidly, minimally informed at best, and then you always look back and wonder, what if I had made this choice, or what if I had made that choice? But at the time, you made the best choice that you could make with what you were given. So it's 100%, and I know that still to this day, 3 years, we just passed 3 years since JC passed, and to this day, my wife and I still debate over whether or not we could have done something different in the very beginning when treatments were changed. And we've also wrestled with we've wrestled with the idea at the end of all of this of actually suing the doctors, because we felt like they kept information from us. We were told flat out from one of the oncologists that we don't tell or share all the big words, because we don't think that people on the outside of the medical community can understand it. And I said, you understand that, number one,
if you don't think we're researching this stuff when you give us that information, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
You give us a piece of paper with 47 different side effects on it. We're going to do research and we're going to see how much of that is relevant, whatever. We understand. And our kids at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, they know what the names of these drugs are. So if you don't think that we're looking into this type of stuff, like don't treat me like I'm some idiot. Like we're in this world. And on top of that, we don't get to shut this off at the end of the day and go home. We are 24/7 doctors, nurses, caretakers, advocates. We're doing it all. And so I even had a recent conversation with somebody a month or so ago where I told him flat out, I said, yes, I'm smarter than the doctors. And he said, you can't be because you didn't go to school. I said, we live it every single day. So do I have a medical degree? No. Do I know all the ins and outs of how, molecules multiply and stuff? No, I don't know any of that stuff. But I know cancer. I know what happened to my daughter, and I know it inside and out. And I guarantee you I could talk a doctor under the table about some of the stuff because I saw it every single day. Mm-hmm. My wife and I did. And it's scary to think that people believe that we're so ignorant to this that we just can't be told. I found out about the leptomeningeal disease that our daughter had in the hospital after her stem cell transplant, and then it was in the report that she had developed leptomeningeal disease. And I said, was anybody going to say anything about this? Like this, she had no issues with as far as cancer spreading and the cells spreading until after the stem cell transplant. And then they said she developed this leptomeningeal, but it wasn't even leptomeningeal disease. It was labeled a different thing. And when I looked up that, it wasn't as serious. It doesn't make any sense that you wouldn't give us all the information to at least prepare for what's happening and what's ultimately going to happen, or give us at least the respect to know that we understand what you're talking about because we live it.
Yeah. To discredit the fact that we wouldn't be smart enough to understand the big words. I mean, you start throwing things, all the chemo names at us, those are big words, all the side effects and things like that. You throw everything at us, but it is frustrating. As parents, you are a caregiver. Like, you're doing medications, you're up with them at night, you're checking for fevers. We had to, my husband has a huge aversion to needles and blood, had to learn how to give Brittany blood thinner injections twice a day because she wanted him to do it. Even though I've worked in the medical field and I could do it, she didn't want me, she wanted him. So yeah, there's all these things that as parents we get thrust upon to take. And towards the end, Brittany started developing seizures, and we were trained as far as rescue seizure meds and how to do it and what we should do. And so to discredit our capabilities, to not share information, that's just really frustrating. And I'm not shocked to hear that has happened, because I feel like it does. That we don't always get all the information. We get what they choose to tell us.
Right. It's what we think you can handle, what we think you can understand, not all the information you need to make the decisions. And having all that information that you need to fully grasp what's going on, I don't understand why. And the fact that we're bringing things to the table every single day.
Yeah.
We're asking you to bring things to the table and asking you to try this or try that. And what are they telling us? They're saying, well, we could try that, but it's not going to make a difference. We could try this, but we don't really have that option. Or they're not saying, hey, why don't you go get that second opinion? Because what I've noticed too is that in this field or in this thing is that doctors are very, very territorial. Mm-hmm. And while I do believe, I don't think that it's a negative aspect of their medical, whatever you want to call it. I just think that if it goes good, they want credit. If it goes bad, they don't want credit. And they would rather share the information if they could, but they'd rather keep it to themselves if it's going to be a good paper. And that's kind of what we've run into. And I'm not saying that's all medical professionals. That's not all oncologists. We had one that was just dedicated to us. I still talk to her now. Mm-hmm. After this. But we also had some that it's like we were interrupting their day.
Yeah, I get the feeling too that when Brittany was first diagnosed, like, we were at Boston Children's. Boston Children's is one of the top people travel across the world to go to Boston Children's to be treated. So when we found her diagnosis, everyone's like, well, what about St. Jude's? Like, why aren't you going to go to St. Jude's? And I'm like, well, you have to understand that even to do a second opinion, a lot of these places, it takes time. You have to submit records and documents, and they have to evaluate them, and they have to have a conference for it. And so when you're talking about an initial diagnosis and you're having to start treatment, time is extremely important. So the time it takes for second opinions too can be very detrimental to starting treatment. And some of these places, once they've started treatment, they don't want to take you on as a patient. And then, like you said, as far as sharing information, that's a big thing too. When Brittany had her spread and we started asking, we reached back out to St. Jude's, and it took them over a month to respond back. And they just didn't have anything. They, like most of them just said, there's really not much you can do. You could try this chemo, you could try that. But thankfully somebody took a chance and was like, yeah, let's try it. Let's try a couple different things. Most of the chemo drugs that are being used to treat these kids are not FDA approved for these kids. So what difference does it make if you are going to be exploratory? That's exactly what the majority of these drugs are. They're not approved for these kids. They're not designed for these kids. They're not designed for these cancers. They're just drugs that were approved for adults and that they've, adjusted to treat kids, which is a whole nother interesting thing that you learn about too, is that there's only 6 drugs actually approved by the FDA to treat childhood cancer. And then when you think about all of the childhood cancers that there are, and then you break them all down into these subtypes. So rhabdomyosarcoma, sarcoma, there's over 100 different types of sarcomas. And then you've got rhabdo, and then you've got alveoli and embryonal. So yeah, these drugs are they're a shot in the dark. They're based off of research and things that have been done for 30 years, but there's not been much improvement in these drugs. And so these kids are just kind of dealing with bottom of the barrel until we get more funding and more research to really make an impact, I think, to help elevate treatments and survival rates for these kids.
Yep. No, it's 100%. And I think that we like to say, or we like to hear a lot, the fact that the drugs are, they're watered down, right, for kids. It's the same drugs that adults are getting, but they're for kids. In reality situation, it's not so much watering down, it's just drawn out over a longer period of time that they're injected. Your chemo could go on for 12 hours versus being, going to adult for 2. It's the same thing. And it's, there's only that 6 approved, and people can say, well, there's hundreds and hundreds of types of drugs that kids can use. Absolutely there are. But there's only 6 that are meant for tiny bodies and meant for kids. And, and the side effects are what you hear outside of the stuff that's written down, or what you're told when you're in and your child is being injected with these drugs, and they say, okay, make sure you don't touch anything that comes out of them. Make sure you wash your hands. Make sure you put gloves on, whatever. And if anybody else out there is like me, I said, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I don't care about any of that. Like, you're telling me that I can't touch what's coming out of them, or I can't help them do this and that, then what's it doing to the inside of them? Yeah. I mean, honestly. And, going through, if people go through the stem cell transplants and what that does to you, that literally takes the inside of you and gets rid of it and starts all over. And, JC developed C. diff, which is horrible. And then the mucositis and all that. It's like, it's terrible what's going on with them. It's terrible what they're going through, but people don't see it on the outside. And what they do see, and, on this show and in our social media circle, we just call them the commercial people, because what you see on TV is not anything what we're going through in real life. Yes, the kids are happy and smiling because they're innocent and because that's what they know. But there's also so much that they go through on a daily basis where they're not happy and they're crying and they're in pain. And when their hair falls out, or when they lose a ton of weight, or when their body just changes, it's like, that's what we see on a 24/7 day basis. That's what we see every day. We don't see happy-go-lucky running around, all this kind of stuff. And again, I commend that organization for the research that they've done. Absolutely 100%. But at the same time, I truly feel like it's false advertising, and you're giving out hope to everybody that it's going to be the end all be all. We put all of our eggs in one basket, we're never going to come up with a cure. We're never going to come up with research that's going to work. We have to allow other companies, other organizations around the world to create this research that's going to make a difference. But also just don't make it seem like you're fixing everything. The boasting of an 80% cure rate is wonderful, but that just means that you're going to live 5 years, at least 5 years, because you're considered cured of cancer at 5 years. And so that 80% means we're giving them at least 5 years of life, which, we would all love to have 5 more years, with our children, but I would rather have them for 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 years. They're supposed to bury us.
Yeah.
This is backwards.
Yeah, it is. And, it's interesting when you talk about the big names that fund research, and it's great. There's very smart people, and there's a lot of research being done. It's just hard when your child has a very unique type of cancer, because you look at adult cancers. What are the 2 most funded researched cancers in adults? Breast cancer and prostate cancer. Those are the big ones that draw in a lot of money. And once you're kind of well established, you continue to draw in money. And so there's other cancers out there that aren't well known. And it's the same thing with kids. Kids are always told, oh, pediatric cancer is rare. It's rare because kids shouldn't be getting it, but then the amount of kids that do get it, there's not enough kids that are able to be studied and researched like there is adults, right? So they say it's hard to study it. So with us, one of our things with research was we wanted to work with somebody that we knew exactly where our money was going as far as what we were donating or what we were asking people to help donate. And it's purely working on rhabdomyosarcoma, which was phenomenal for us. We didn't think that we would find something like that. We thought maybe we'd find a project or a clinical trial or something. But we actually have found an organization that works mainly with all of the rare childhood cancers. They don't really do a lot with leukemia and, the big ones like that. And so that was a big passion of ours after Brittany passed, was supporting research and ensuring that we were supporting something that we were very passionate and involved with. And we were able to find that, which was really helpful because it just gives us hope that one day there'll be a change with rhabdomyosarcoma, and especially the embryonal, which is what Brittany had.
Yeah. No, I was looking a little bit at it the other day, and even this morning about it. And it's, if you can find those, we look at it on our side of it. JC had choroid plexus carcinoma. It's a super rare brain cancer that most people have never heard of. And I found one doctor in New York that's actually researching it and had gotten a government grant to actually continue researching it. This is one of those things where I've been trying to work with the college here to say, I just need that one bright-eyed, bushy-tailed student that just wants to go outside the realm of easy and find that one thing that nobody's looking at that's sitting in the corner collecting dust and figure it out. That's all we need, right? We need those people that aren't going to study the same thing over and over again. Listen, I want you to fix all of it.
Yeah.
From leukemia to DIPG to rhabdomyosarcoma. I want you to fix it all. But look at these more now as a whole, as a whole, pediatric cancer is not rare. So don't say that. Don't keep that garbage going. But some of these types that these children have are extremely rare and affect very few children, and therefore the research isn't there because you're researching the big stuff, right? And again, for people, and I've had people on, with their children that have had leukemia, and they've heard the ever popular, well, at least they've got the good cancer type of garbage, right? But I've also been in contact and been close to families whose children have died from leukemia. It's not just a curable, oh, you've got leukemia, no big deal, we'll take care of it. They all need to be fixed. They all need to be researched. But these more rare subtypes of cancer in children have got to get more attention. We have got to get more people and more doctors, scientists, students that want to get into this and figure it out. So yeah. I'm hopeful that, with what you're able to do, and hopefully someday we'll be able to be on that path of that we continue. But as parents, as advocates, nonprofits, whatever, unfortunately, we carry the load of all of this. It's not our government. It's not, it's not that. It's not millionaires and billionaires. It's us carrying the load little bits at a time, trying to make a difference. And it's hard because this is a subject and a topic that most people can just shut their eyes, turn around, and walk away from and pretend that it doesn't exist. And it's because they're told and you're conditioned throughout your entire life that it's rare, it doesn't affect that many people, and there's a big organization out there that is fixing everything, so there's nothing to worry about. And that's how we grow up. That's how we live.
Yeah, I mean, before Brittany was diagnosed, I'd seen kids, social media, things like that, diagnosed with cancer. And yeah, I'd sit there and say, that sucks and I feel so sorry. But yeah, my day moved on, which is really sad. And now being on the other end of that, I make it a point every day of my life to be either talking about her or advocating or sharing stories, because it's not even just, the other thing too is, they deal with all of the medications and the treatments, but the big impact is to a whole family, right? So you have other children. I'm sure you and your wife work. So when your child is diagnosed with cancer, your whole world implodes, and your main focus is caring for your child. Like, your job kind of goes out the window. At the end of the day, you still have to put a roof over your head and provide for your other child. And so now you're dealing with that worry, that stress. How are you going to do that? Also, you never know when your kid's going to end up in the emergency room, being neutropenic, how often they're going to be staying in the hospital. You have other children that your attention is literally pulled away from them as much as you try to care for both of them. Obviously, there's a top priority there that you just can't ignore. And so I know for my husband and I, we spent a lot of times together with our youngest. Our older she was almost 16, very well responsible and a good head on her shoulders too. But, there needs to be more awareness too for the mental health of parents as you're going through this, and financial support, because even for like state leave, you only get 12 weeks as a parent to care for a child, whether they have a terminal diagnosis or not. The Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, or FMLA, only guarantees job protection for 12 weeks. And when you're looking at childhood cancer diagnosis, most of these kids, their treatments are lasting a year or longer. And so most of the time, one of the parents has to end up quitting their job. So now these families are in a huge financial struggle. So trying to also see about being an advocacy for more support for the families too, beyond just like research. And so that was one of the other things with starting our foundation, is helping with financial support to families, helping pay bills or things like that, because at the end of the day, most likely one of them is quitting their job. And then if they have multiple kids, I've seen families that have both had to leave work because they have a sick child and they have a lot of young children at home, and the cost of daycare and things like that. So trying to make more awareness in that sense too, as far as support for families that are going through this, because it's not like a 12-week thing that's one and done. It's not every trip is planned, every hospital stay is planned. There's times where we ended up in the hospital in the ICU for 2 weeks. We had no idea when we were getting out. So there's a lot of that too that doesn't get talked about when you talk about the huge impact that a family goes through, and the mental health, and you start feeling that nobody gets it, and you have nobody to talk to. And one of the things that I did find in this community is a club you never want to be a part of. It sucks, but you actually meet some of the most incredible people that support you, complete strangers that may support you that you have never met. Some of your best friends start becoming other cancer parents just because they know exactly how you feel and what you've been through. And it's hard for some other people that haven't lived that life to understand, and it's too painful for them sometimes to be around that. I've noticed.
Yeah. I mean, so on the working and trying to balance all of that kind of stuff, that is absolutely something that I don't think people truly understand. They look at you, they look at all the parents that are in the hospital with their kids, and I don't know if they're thinking that money is just magically coming from the sky to help pay for all that. But no, we're taking time off of work. I took months and months and months off of work. I had all this annual leave, sick leave built up. I had to burn through all of it. And at the time I was working a government job, and they fronted me another almost year's worth of leave to be able to take off. But the way that works is you have to work it off. So then I spent a year basically paying back the leave that I had used before our daughter passed away. And it was one of those things. At that time, no, my wife did not work. We were a single income family for most of our marriage, and it worked for us. It was fine. Yeah. But then I was taking all this time off. There was no real money coming in, and you're burning through your savings, and you're doing everything you can, because at that point, and I've mentioned this too, when it comes to no family ever receives a bill. I don't like that. Doesn't mean anything to me, because you're hoping in a sense that insurance is taking care of a lot of things, and your normal everyday life, whatever you get from that is not going to pay for all of what you're having to go through. Mm-hmm. That stuff, I don't jump on board with that. I just can't. But it is tough financially. It is a very hard diagnosis to go through, and for us, for the 520 days that JC was fighting, it was $2.5 million worth of bills. It was a 45-minute helicopter life flight that was $45,000. Unfreaking real. And going through and looking at these bills, and to be honest with you, I think the insurance companies are like, please stop. It's getting to be too much. We're paying for, and when you break it down and look at what it costs for, the private room when you're at the hospital, like they make it sound like it's a resort or something like that. Okay, it's $30,000 a day. It's, I think her stem cell was $600,000, and you're looking at it and like, how in the hell can you even justify charging that amount of money for these types of treatments and then not worry about what we're going through as parents? Mm-hmm. The first hospital stay was 2 weeks, and the longest one was 52 days. That's a long time for us to be away from work, away from our other family members. We have 2 older daughters. I have a daughter that's 18. She's going to be leaving for college in a month. And I have a 16-year-old now she got her license. We don't see her anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's, she's got that freedom. But they were heavily affected by all this in different ways because, again, like you said, your attention is drawn away from everything else, and it's focusing on your child, which it should be. But, I felt a lot of guilt for I still do, that I missed out on so much time with my other 2 daughters. I wasn't able to. Now, they understood, and they're level-headed, and they realized, you have to do this. We're not mad at you. But at the same time, you could tell that it affected them. You could tell that it I don't know if it angered them, but also that they did feel slighted and they felt left out. And then you become that parent, and maybe I'm the only one, or maybe everybody's like this, that says yes to everything after that because you feel like you've missed so much, and you don't want to take that, you don't want to miss any opportunities anymore, because a diagnosis like this came out of nowhere. Nobody is expecting your life to turn upside down like this, and you definitely do not want to take an opportunity and throw it away, because of anything. You're going to make sure that if your kids say, can we do this? Yes, absolutely. Because we're going to take all that time and we're going to soak it up. And they, siblings, they don't get, they do, there's a lot of support systems out there for siblings that are going through this, but they all deal with it very, very differently. I have 2 daughters, and both of them deal with the loss of their sister, a complete 180 from each other. And it's, to watch it, it's like neither one is wrong, neither one is right. I can't tell you how to grieve. I can't tell you how to move forward, but it is 100%. They both, we all sit down and still laugh at watching videos and how goofy JC was. And we, when we smile at times after she passed, I thought, are we allowed to smile? Are we supposed to be happy? Is that okay? And, and then you learn that yes, it is, because that's who they were, and that's what they would have wanted, is for you to continue and be happy. And if Brittany is anything like what JC was, they care more about you and how you're going to be and how you're feeling. than how they're feeling. They want to make sure you're okay. Her siblings are okay. That was the morning she passed. Hours before, she was having trouble breathing. I looked at her in the eyes and I said, "Are you okay?" And she looked at me and she shook her head, yes. At that moment, I told my wife, I said, "Go get her sisters now, because I think this is the time." She knew what was going on. She knew what was happening. And within minutes, she was in that sleep that they don't wake up from. But even at that point, she was making sure that we were okay. She wasn't trying to make us scared or sad. It was, "I'm okay. I'm all right." And that's a side that if you, in this community, and what I've heard so much of, if you think that part of their life happens fast, it feels like a million years. Like a million years.
Yeah. It does. It truly does. And then even after that, you're still in shock as far as, is this real? Is this really what just happened? Yeah, grief is, we are just a little over a year, and it's hard. It's, we were at that point too, like, the first time you laughed, like, is this okay? Is this, and we had a point where it was a few months after my older daughter grieves completely differently than us, which is understandable. It's just hard sometimes. And my husband and I started grief counseling about 2 weeks after Brittany passed, because I knew it was going to be just unbearable for us, which was helpful. But I remember a moment where it had been like maybe a couple months after Brittany passed, and my husband and I were doing something. I think I was singing or did something silly, and we were working on a puzzle, and my older daughter just started crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "It's just nice to see you guys be you." She's like, "Because you're not that much." So that's hard too. Like you said, trying to continue to be a parent for the children that you still have here, and living with the grief and the loss of the ones that are now up above. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a transition, and it's one that nobody should ever have to make, to try to figure out how to make up lost time with your other children. And watching them, our girls grieve, like I said, differently. They grieve by talking to their friends. Like, that's their outlet. That's the way they've always done it. Our younger daughter is very much involved in everything we do, day-to-day basis. She wants to be involved. She very much carries JC's legacy with her everywhere she goes. Our older daughter does the same, but she's not outspoken about it. It's very much internal. And for us, if we're having really bad days, and, my wife and I will go through it, and I'm sure you feel this too, that there are just days that you just wake up and it's just hard, and you're remembering things, or it's an anniversary of something, or Facebook memories pop up, and it's just a day that you just want to be sad. And sometimes you're sad and you don't know why. And for the first year or so, anytime our girls were having bad days or were fighting with each other more so than sisters do, we would ask, does this have anything to do with, and they would get mad. Like, not everything has to do with this. Not everything has to do with that. It's like, we understand that it doesn't, but also you guys don't talk to us. You don't let us in, and we've always kind of prided ourselves on being a very open, family. Like, if anything ever happens, you can come to us. We're, we were the youngest parents in their friend group. We still are. And when they were in elementary school, it's like we were always that young couple that it felt like, okay, you can come over there, parents are cool and whatever. And, because it is what it is. We always tell them, like, listen, you're 18. I'm 43. It wasn't that long ago that I was doing the same stupid things you're doing, and whatever. And so but yeah, they just don't, they grieve differently and they act differently, and they don't associate a lot of things with this. But at the same time, when I can look at my daughter's Instagram or her Snapchats come through, and there's days when she's really sad, that's where she's posting things and not saying anything to us. And that's okay. But it's difficult because, they see us in different ways. And a lot of, people on the outside look at us as damaged goods, I think, and look at us as broken. And support systems a lot of times break down after your child passes. And a lot of people run away hiding and scared because they don't know how to talk to you. So the best thing they can do is ghost, which I say is the worst thing that you can do, because I think in the time after your child passes, that's when we need support the most to really kind of decide how we're going to move forward and kind of create this new normal. And whether that's advocating or whether that's staying out of this community completely, we need that support from you. And you don't get a lot of that. For us, unfortunately, you purge a lot of people out of your life because they were only there for what my wife calls the freak show. And now once that's over, they don't want to be around you anymore. And it's a shame.
It is. It is true. You definitely have people that are there throughout the whole time, are still there for you. They're trying to just navigate where they fit now, which, because I'm sure you and your wife, just like my husband and I, we are completely different people, completely changed. Our priorities have changed, our outlooks have changed, our personalities have changed, not completely, but there's been a big change in our life with the loss of Brittany, and not just that, but also the whole 2 years of everything that we went through, all of her treatments and the times and all the good times with her and all the bad times. And she had a couple incidences where she had really bad chemo reactions. She had neurotoxicity, and we were being told at one point, like, this is it. And she had to be on like methylene blue and all this stuff. And there was times that we were preparing, like, are you serious? Like, this is what we're looking at. And there's things that we've never fully shared with people, just because I don't think that they could handle it or understand. And so the things that you witness as a parent, that your child has to go through, and the tubes, the connections, everything, like, it's traumatizing. And so, there's some people that you're right, are there during everything. And then once they've passed, or maybe once they've recovered, for some families, it's people just move on. And they think that, it's just moving forward with their life, and your life is forever kind of in this kind of frozen standstill. Like, I'm here and I'm moving forward, but there's a lot that, just, it doesn't resonate the same. And like you said, there's days where it's really hard to get up. It's every day I think about Brittany, and some days it's just really harder than others. There's days where there's flashbacks to those times in like the ICU, or then there's always the what ifs. What if I had done this? What if we had done this sooner? What if we had, chosen this path instead? Or what if her ear infection got diagnosed sooner? Or what did we miss? What were some signs or symptoms that maybe were overlooked? And then there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of anger as far as just, why did this have to happen to her? why did her path end like this? Why did she have to get cancer? Why was it missed for so long? Why didn't the doctors think of cancer? It's just, there's a lot of emotions that go into this journey, to the grief, and life after.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that I'll tell people is that in a situation where your child passes, you never move on. You only move forward. And you're moving forward in a different way. You're moving forward and trying to find a new normal to your life based on the way that your family is now. And but you're never going to change who you are as a parent. You are a parent to, like for us, we're a parent to 3 kids. And if anybody asks me how many kids do you have, it's always 3. It will always be 3. But not everybody can handle the information that you're going to give them. And I think that I kind of pick and choose if people talk about it, and I'll say, yeah, I've got an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And if I feel like they can handle the information, I'll say, and that 8-year-old is no longer with us. She's in heaven, and and that gets into the story. And to be honest, I wish I could share it with everybody, and people are, often sometimes scared to ask you or about it and feel like it's going to upset you. And yeah, it will. But at the same time, I love talking about her. I love talking about it because that means someone else that didn't know now knows. That means they're directed to what we're trying to do, both with the nonprofit and just as a family, what we're trying to do. And so I want to talk about it all the time. Ask me all the questions you want about JC. Ask my wife about her. We love to talk about her. And I'm assuming that you're probably the same way. It's like you want to share these stories.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt me. I'm already hurting. I'm already sad. I'm already thinking about her all the time. So you asking me is, yeah, maybe I'll tear up a bit because it's nice that somebody's asking me, or it's somebody else is thinking about her or wants to know about her. But it's not going to hurt me any more than what I'm already dealing with every day to talk about her or to hear your memories about her. I love if people share photos or videos that they have that I hadn't seen before, or they share memories that maybe I hadn't thought about. So it is nice when other people are remembering your child just as much as you are.
100%. 100%. And in the beginning I got, and I still do, but in the beginning I got text messages and messages from people I've never met, I've never heard of, I have no idea who they are, that have said that JC's story touched them in a way that just made a positive impact on their life. And that's amazing to me. And it's amazing what these kids can do. And I say all the time, if you are not connected to this community in a personal manner, just talk to one of these children for 5 minutes. Just have a conversation with them, whether they're 4 years old or 18 years old. Have a conversation with them. They will change your perspective on life, 100%. Because what they're going through is so horrific and so terrible, and the treatments are god-awful, and what you see them go through, and they're smiling. And they're like, yeah, whatever. When JC lost her hair, she said, oh, I guess I just won't have to brush it anymore. That was her attitude. When they told her, you'll never have kids. And we had that opportunity as well. We chose not to do it at that point just because of where she was in her treatment. And she's like, that's okay, I'll just adopt. That was her attitude, at 7, 8 years old. That's what these kids, that's how amazing and innocent and genuine they are.
Yeah.
You have to give them, it's not even, I don't know if it's demanded or if it's just, they deserve the respect to talk to them like adults. I know that her doctors would do it. We would do it. Talk to them like adults, give them that respect. And, she would flush her own ports and help do all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I used to say, if you guys just want to leave the medicine behind, she'll take care of it on her own, because that's, they learned, this is like life skills that they're learning that, people pay a lot of money to go to school for, and they're learning it almost like forced, and they could, but they're doing it with a smile, but they also feel in control when they're so out of control of this whole situation. That's something that they control. And
it's funny that you bring up the control thing, because Brittany was the same. When she got comfortable with treatment and we would have appointments, she would want to know what was going to happen at every appointment. Like, she needed to know ahead of time. Like, are they accessing my port? Am I getting this? What's happening today? And at 4 years old, she was already being like, okay, we're going to access the port. Okay, that's easy. I can do that. And so I think control is a big thing for them, and just, again, they are young, and it's hard to maybe articulate some of the things that they're going to go through, but they did want to, like, Brittany wanted to know, and she would act, flush her own port and stuff like that, but she definitely wanted to know what was happening at different things, with different visits and things like that.
Yeah, they pick up on so much more than I think they're given credit for. But yeah, I know that, with her or with Jace, it was when she had sedations in the very beginning, she would wake up angry at the world. She hated us with a passion and anybody around her. As it got further down the line, it just became, she'd wake up and it would be, hungry. It would take her longer to wake up. She said that when she had propofol that it tasted fuzzy. I don't know what that means, but that's what she said. And it was, she knew what was happening. She knew what was going on. The first time I ever saw her be sedated for her radiation was probably the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life, because the doctors didn't prepare me for the fact that when they gave her propofol that it was going to be like that. Like she was just going to be out. And she was like, she always had a tablet because Child Life would come in, which incredible people. Yeah. And she would be playing a game or watching a video or something, and then they'd give it to her, and it was just, she was done. She was out cold, and it was scary. And then she would, after that, once we got started going through radiation, she'd wake up like, it's time to eat. Let's go. Let's have our snack and let's get out of here. And then she'd come home and go outside and play. Like it wasn't a big deal. Like it didn't affect her in that way. It was, radiation for her was no big deal.
Yeah.
And, we had some really good doctors that were, they would make it a game for her, even if it was just sitting on the bed to wheel it down to the radiation room. They would make it a game, and they would make it comfortable for her. And that's the kind of people that we loved and that we love to be around and have part of our team, not the ones that didn't want to listen to our pleas or our cries or just our advice on anything, because God forbid, we bring up advice that, we're not medically qualified enough to understand.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about the radiation. It sounds like JC and Brittany had very similar experiences as far as, Brittany hated having it done. She complained about buzzing behind her eyes, so she wanted it very quick. But she would always wake up angry after she started getting sedated. Like every sedation was really bad. But the nice thing was we were living in Boston at the time, and Boston MGH was incredible, and they were always trying to get us like tickets to activities and stuff. So every day we would leave treatment. We were right in the center of Boston. She just wanted to go explore. She wanted to visit the dog parks and check out the dogs, or we would do duck boat tours. So it is incredible. Like you said, JC would just go and play, and Brittany was like, okay, we've done this. Now let's go enjoy the rest of our day and explore. And it's one of the things I look back on her journey is, for us, relocating to Boston for 6 weeks was a lot, but it also allowed my husband and I to just be with her every single day. We both went for the whole 6 weeks, and we've just made every day fantastic, not knowing what the future holds, not knowing that she was going to have the spread. And I look back at that time, and it was some of the best days that we had was when we were living in Boston. Even though she was undergoing treatment every day and being sedated, we made the most of it. And she was a big advocate for just doing something fun every day.
Yeah, it's the similarities with these children and with Brittany and JC is so incredible at this point to kind of listen to it. And JC was full of life no matter what. That was just if she was not feeling well, she still found a way to make you laugh or to make you smile, and that was her thing. Yeah. She hated to be on camera unless it was on her terms. So it's like if she had the camera and she was, if you try to take a picture, no. But if I walked out of the room, Dad, give me your phone because I'm in it, whatever. And that's how she was, and she loved it. And the thing with us for radiation, I think what kind of is our debate going forward now is that she had 30 rounds of radiation and she ended on May 12th. And at that point, in that last appointment, we came in to do the follow-up, and our oncologist came in, and through consultations between them, CHOP, and I believe Sick Kids in Canada decided that based on the way she was reacting, there was no evidence of disease at that point. We did not need to move forward with chemo. So we did not. We stopped treatment. There was nothing else to do because they said there's no spread, there's no cancer cells in her spinal fluid, there's nothing. There's no growth back in the area of her brain where we're radiating, so everything looks great, so we're going to stop. At that point, I went home. I told my wife, and it's like we were elated. We've taken a cancer that we were told has a horrible, survival rate, and she's beat it. And through radiation and total resection through surgeries, and it's going to be okay. And then from May until September, it was like a normal child. I mean, we were in COVID times at that point because it was 2020, and it was like, so the world was shut down, but we made the best of it. And she, had her sisters at home, and we had neighbors that they played with. These are the same age. And it was great. The greatest probably 4 months that she had. And then she relapsed in that September, and they had found, a tiny pencil eraser size tumor at the base of her brainstem, which of course is inoperable. So they said, okay, we're going to start chemo right away. Now, one of the problems is they started the same exact chemo that they had planned earlier. There was never a reevaluation. There was never any of that. It was just like, oh, this is a plan. We're going to get into it. But the debate is, if we would have started chemo 4 months earlier, would it have made a difference? I don't know. And nobody knows the answer to that. But my biggest thing is, even if we've kept everything the same, she got 4 months of just incredible life with her sisters, without chemo, without doctor's visits, without any of that. And I think that taking that away would have been detrimental, or it would have been worse. But again, we never know. Yeah. But it was like we were just trying to live life, and I guess hoping that everything was going to be good and we were going to be that success story. And so my push forward after she relapsed and after she passed has always been for parents, when you get the diagnosis or the NED or cancer-free or ring the bell, I'm so happy for you, 100%. But please, God, don't take your foot off the gas. Don't just assume that everything is over and let your guard down. And it's not to scare people. It's really not to make you feel uneasy. It's that the minute that you take your guard down, cancer is a fickle bitch. I'm sorry. And it will come back, and it can sit dormant for years. Mm-hmm. Just don't, enjoy your victories. Please enjoy your victories 100%, but just don't take your foot off the gas with it.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree with that. And I think balancing their care and also allowing them to be kids is a really tough road to navigate. That was one of the what ifs that I struggled with a lot. Was we're not far from Boston. We're about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours with traffic. When Brittany was first diagnosed, we asked, as far as her chemo, could it be done back home? We have a level 1 trauma hospital 20 minutes from us. They have a PD oncology. We said, can we just do the chemo at home? And Boston said, yes, we'll work with them. We'll set you up at home. And it's always one of the things that I have said to my husband, well, what if we had just moved out to Boston, just like people that move across the world? But my husband always tells me, yeah, but then she wouldn't have been home for all those times, with her sister and her dogs and her comforts, her room and stuff like that. And so it's one of the things that it does make a big impact. And, I play the what if game all the time. What if we had just stayed in Boston and done everything there? And would it have made a difference? Probably not. Same chemo drugs, same everything. But the difference is that she was able to be home and be in her comforts and really enjoy her, her life that she was living and making the most of every day, riding her bike and swimming and things like that, which we wouldn't have gotten if we were living in a hotel room or, things like that. So.
Yeah. The what if game is it's something that we're not supposed to do, right? You're also not supposed to Google or WebMD symptoms and things like that. But, ultimately we were going to do it. So telling us not to is kind of just a waste of breath. But the what if game is unfortunately something that we'll live with for the rest of our life. It's an unfortunate side effect of all of this is that, we can always look back and say, what if we had done this differently? I look at pictures now that come up, and I don't know what it is about my brain that looks at it and says, at that point, I only had 30 days left with her. At that point, she only had a year left to live. And for me, it's like, what could we have done differently to make that life more enjoyable? But then I have to have the conversation with myself that we made her life as great as we absolutely could with all the tools that we had. And you have to believe that, and you have to understand that and know that you did everything you could. We did everything we could. And there's nothing that we could have done differently that we know for certain would have made any amount of difference. I know that one of the hardest things that we had to do that actually was a big fight with one of our daughters was signing a DNR. And signing that paper to our daughter at that time, which is completely understandable, meant that we were giving up, meant that we were just, essentially washing our hands of the situation. And it wasn't the case. A DNR, much like hospice care, I think is so misunderstood in the manner that, especially with a child, you do it because you know that the efforts that it would take to bring a child back from that moment would be more detrimental to them and their health and their quality of life than just allowing it to happen peacefully. Signing that DNR was the hardest thing we've ever had to do. We actually had to sign it twice, which is, that was a fantastic feeling, but we had to sign it for the hospital in order to take her home when they said there's nothing more we can do. And they wanted us to stay there, and we said, hell no, we're going home. This is not the last thing she's going to see is this hospital room. So they made us sign the DNR. That was our saying that if she codes on the way home, we're not responsible. We didn't care. We said, unhook her, we're going home. We had to sign another one for the hospice care. And those forms that, I've got boxes and boxes of medical documents, and those forms are the ones that I remember the most. Because when you sign them, you know what it means. You understand what it means, and you understand that that moment, when it comes down to it, you've chosen to not have heroic measures taken to bring your child back, to let them pass. Mm-hmm. And to our daughter, like I said, she was angry, very angry with us. And it was hard to explain. We're not giving up. We're not throwing in the towel. We're making the best choice for her comfort at this moment. She's been through so much. And the decline was actually really fast once we got home from laughing and playing and everything that starts to happen as your body is shutting down. And signing that form meant that we weren't giving up, but we were definitely saying goodbye. And it's signing it for your parent, signing it for your adult, even signing it for your spouse, in a situation, that's a completely different feeling. And when people say, I understand, but you don't.
No. When it was right before Brittany's 5th birthday, we ended up having to take her to the hospital, and she started, she had been on seizure medication. She had a really bad seizure, in the hospital. They didn't know it at the time, and that was kind of the start of the decline, where they told us her cancer continued to spread. Basically, it was now all within her spine, and they pulled my husband and I into a room and said, this is what we're looking at. This is it. And we had to sign a DNR, which again, it's heartbreaking because you're not giving up, but you also are saving them from being put through things that are not going to change the cancer. They're not going to change the outlook. And so it's protecting them and providing them that peace. But it's hard. It's the hardest thing to sit there and be told throughout the year. Every time you get a piece of bad news in the cancer world, it it hits you so hard. And then to be finally at that end where they're just saying, there's nothing we can do, the cancer spread. She started having really bad seizures where she stopped. She wasn't talking. The left side of her body she wasn't able to move it. And so, unfortunately, we weren't able to get her home. We were in a different state. There was all sorts of legalities, but it's interesting when you bring up hospice, because at first hospice was presented to us. And so we're told, like, yeah, we'll set you up. You can take them home. So she's like on IV meds and IV feeding tube and stuff like that. And then you start thinking like, okay, we'll get home, and you start planning the logistics. And it's interesting because hospice is basically, we were told you can take her home, but we're not going to continue any medications. Like you're going to just take her home and let her starve, and no medications. And I was like, that to me is not acceptable. I'm sorry, but so it was really frustrating learning a little bit more about the world of hospice and how you think it's one thing, and that it's going to help you like get you home, get her on her meds, and allow her to have this time at home. And really, they're like, no, we're just going to send you home, and we're not really worried about continuing any type of nutrition. And as a parent, I couldn't do it. And we were still fighting, even though we signed the DNR, and we weren't giving up. And so it was just one of those things where hospice is not all that it seems it is. And that was another big thing of eye-opening. Not giving medication, not giving nutrition, just comfort measures. That's a hard thing as a parent, to be told that you're losing your child, and then you also have to make these decisions to just stop everything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, hospice for us was, we had 12 days with her on hospice before she passed, and they were actually really good in a sense of, everything stayed the same with medications. They came every now and again, to check on her and things like that. But it also got to the point where she couldn't swallow anymore, and she couldn't talk to us anymore. And so at one point we said, we want to put in a G tube, is that we want to give her nutrition, because she's not getting it through. She had the NG, and it didn't work because she would pull it out, because at that point, her mental state was starting to change, and she would just I don't think it was intentional. We taped that thing to her face so much that I don't even know how the heck she did it, but she would rip it out. And so we wanted that. And at one point, being on the phone call, we had hospice nurse there, and we had, our oncologist on the phone, and he said, we're not going to prove it because, she's probably not going to make it through the surgery. And then we were told on the phone, which it was shocking to me, and it takes a lot to get my wife upset, a lot to get her angry. Basically, when she starts cussing, that's when she's really pissed, and it takes a lot to do that. And it got to the point where the doctor said, starving is not a painful way to die.